Welcome back to the deep dive. It is Saturday, February 7th, 2026. And I have to be honest with you, looking at the stack of reports, intelligence assessments, and diplomatic cables we have piled up on the table today, the world feels heavy.
It really does.
There is a specific kind of tension in the air right now. You can almost taste the static.
It is palpable.
Yeah.
And, if you have been doom scrolling the headlines on your phone, you might think we are just seeing the usual geopolitical noise.
Right, the standard back and forth.
Exactly.
Right.
But if you actually sit down and read the trade data, the shipping reports, and the back-channel chatter, which is exactly what we've done for this dive, you realize we aren't just in a lull.
No.
We are standing in the eye of a storm.
That is exactly the feeling I got reading through this. It's the calm that isn't really calm. And that is why we are clearing the decks today. We aren't doing 3 or 4 different topics. We aren't bouncing around. We are dedicating this entire deep dive to one singular, massive subject, the Middle East, but not the surface level stuff you see on the evening news.
No, we have to go deeper.
We need to understand the machinery. We need to understand the money, the weapons, and the desperate diplomacy happening behind closed doors between Tehran, Moscow, Washington, and the Gulf.
And the timing is critical. We are sitting here in February 2026. The temperature is redlining. But the fascinating thing that jumped out at me from these sources, and we have a lot of them, is that the war, well, it's already started.
It's already here.
It just doesn't look like World War II. It doesn't look like the movies.
Right, this concept of the silent war, that really stuck with me in the prep for this. We tend to think of war as declarations, ambassadors being recalled, tanks rolling across borders in broad daylight.
Things you see on camera.
Exactly. But the sources are describing something much more insidious. They call them quiet sparks.
Exactly. It's conflict creeping in through the side door. It's cyber disruptions. It's economic strangulation. It's infrastructure sabotage.
It's deniable.
It's the kind of warfare that happens in the gray zone where you can't quite prove who did it, or it's just below the threshold of a massive response. And we have a perfect, terrifying example of this popping up just this week. Did you see the reports on Starlink?
I did, and it honestly blew my mind. We're seeing confirmed reports, multiple sources of Russian technical assistance in disrupting Starlink services inside Iran.
Okay, let's just pause on that for a second. Think about the layers of that. We need to unpack why that matters so much.
It's more than just internet access.
So much more. Starlink isn't just better internet or a way to stream movies. In a restrictive environment like Iran, where the state controls the flow of information with an iron grip, Starlink is the only lifeline.
It's the only way out.
It's the only way for citizens to bypass the state censorship firewall, to communicate with the outside world, to organize, to see the truth.
It's the hole in the digital Berlin Wall.
Precisely. And for Russia to step in, not just to sell weapons, which we know they do, but to say, here, let us bring our electronic warfare capabilities to help you block the truth, to help you blind your population, that implies a level of cooperation that is way deeper than just a business deal.
It feels personal. It signals a digital alignment.
It is Moscow and Tehran joining forces in the ether. They are saying explicitly that they're going to contest Western technology together.
A new front in the war.
It's a front line that doesn't exist on a map. There are no trenches. But it's where the battle for information is being sought. And if they can successfully jam Starlink, they are effectively blinding the West's ability to influence the Iranian Strait.
So you have this silent war bubbling in the background. That's the context. But the central tension we need to unpack today, the thing that keeps the analysts whose reports we read up at night, is this race.
It feels like a sprint.
It really does. A sprint between diplomacy and technology-driven warfare.
That is the central dynamic of February 2026. Can the diplomats talk faster than the centrifuges spin?
Can they cut a deal faster than the drone swarms can launch?
Exactly. Because the sources are very clear on the stakes here. If diplomacy fails, we aren't looking at a regional skirmish. You aren't looking at a repeat of the 1980s Iran-Iraq war or a localized conflict.
The phrase used in that one intelligence brief was a global economic heart attack.
A heart attack. I want you, our listeners, to really visualize that. Not a fever, not a cold, not a sprained ankle.
It's not something you recover from quickly.
It's a sudden systemic shock that stops the blood flow of the global economy.
That is a terrifying image. And we are going to get into the anatomy of that heart attack later in the dive because I think people underestimate just how bad it could get.
They really do.
We think gas prices go up a bit, right? But this is different. However, before we get to the catastrophe scenario, we have a mission, We need to understand the player at the center of this. We need to talk about Iran.
We do, and we need to look past the rhetoric, past the headlines.
Because if you look at the last 5-6 years, the narrative coming out of Washington and Europe has been maximum pressure. Sanctions, banking freezes, isolation, seizing assets.
All the tools in the toolbox.
By all conventional logic, the Iranian economy should be dead. It should have flatlined years ago.
You would think so. I mean, if you look at the textbook definition of sanctions, they are designed to strangle an economy until the government either collapses or comes to the table to surrender.
But it hasn't. It's struggling, sure. It's limping. Inflation is through the roof.
No question.
But it's surviving. The lights are on. The regime is still there. So, part one of our deep dive today is figuring out how. How is Iran keeping the lights on?
It's what we call the paradox of resilience. It's a fascinating concept. When you squeeze a balloon, the air doesn't vanish. It just bulges out somewhere else.
That's a great way to put it.
The Iranian economy has adapted like water finding cracks in stone. It flows around the blockage. And to understand where that water is flowing, we have to look east. We have to talk about the China connection.
This was, for me, one of the most eye-opening parts of the research. Because if you go to the official website of the Chinese Customs Authority, or you look at the international energy reports from official bodies, and you look for imports from Iran, what do you see?
Zero. A big round zero. The official number on the books is zero.
Which is incredible. It's a statistical lie. Because the reality on the water is slightly different.
It's a lot different. The reality is that Iran is exporting somewhere in the ballpark of 1.5 million barrels of oil every single day.
1.5 million barrels.
And the vast majority of that estimates range from 80% to 90% is ending up in China.
Okay, I have to stop you there. I need to wrap my head around the physical scale of this. How do you hide 1.5 million barrels of oil a day?
Right.
We aren't talking about smuggling a suitcase of cash or a bag of diamonds through an airport. These are super tankers. They are the size of skyscrapers laying on their side.
They're enormous.
They show up on satellite imagery. How does that much physical stuff move around the world without officially existing?
It's a massive, sophisticated logistical operation. It's what the industry calls the ghost trade. And it relies on a specific type of buyer in China that most people have never heard of. We're talking about Sinopec or CNPC, the big state-owned energy giants.
Why not? Why wouldn't the big Chinese companies just buy it? It's cheap, right?
It is cheap, but they have international exposure. They trade in dollars. They have assets in New York and London. They're listed on stock exchanges. They can't risk U.S. sanctions.
They're too visible?
Way too visible. If they get caught buying Iranian oil, they get locked out of the global banking system.
Yeah.
It's just too risky for them. The reputational damage would be immense.
So who is buying it? Who is willing to take that risk?
The teapots.
The teapots. That sounds quaint. Like a tea party.
It's a colloquial term, but there's nothing cute about them. These are independent refineries, mostly clustered in Shandong province in eastern China. They are private, they are scrappy, and they operate on razor-thin margins. They don't have the deep pockets of the state giants. They are fighting for survival in a brutally competitive market.
So they're hungry.
They are hungry for cheap inputs. They need an edge.
So they are the bargain hunters of the industrial world. They are the guys clipping coupons.
That's the perfect analogy. They are the outlet store shoppers of the global energy market, and Iran is offering the sale of the century.
What kind of discount are we talking about here?
It fluctuates, but the data suggests Iranian heavy crude is trading at a massive discount, something like $12 to $15 below the Brent crude benchmark price.
That is a huge spread in the oil world. I mean, normally you're haggling over cents on the barrel.
It's enormous.
Yeah.
It makes Iranian oil cheaper than Russian oil, cheaper than Venezuelan oil. It's the cheapest barrel on the market, by far.
So for a teapot refinery manager, the math is simple.
The math is incredibly simple. If I buy Saudi oil at market price, I break even or maybe lose money after my costs. If I buy Iranian oil at a $12 discount, I make a healthy profit.
And the risk of sanctions doesn't faze them.
The sanctions risk doesn't matter to them because they don't do business in dollars. They don't have assets in New York. The U.S. Treasury can't hurt them because they don't exist in the U.S. financial system. They're insulated.
That is fascinating. So the sanctions themselves created a market niche for these specific refineries.
It's a classic case of unintended consequences.
Huh.
The pressure created an opportunity.
Okay, so the buyer is motivated, the seller is desperate. But let's go back to the logistics. How does the oil actually get from a terminal in the Persian Gulf to a port in Shandong without the U.S. Navy or satellite trackers flagging it.
This is where we enter the world of the shadow fleet.
It sounds like a spy novel title, The Shadow Fleet.
It basically is. Iran, and now Russia too, they've learned from this playbook, utilizes an armada of aging tankers. These are ships that are often 20, 25 years old.
That's ancient for a tanker.
It is. In the normal shipping world, these ships would be scrapped, they would be turned into razor blades, they would never pass a safety inspection in Rotterdam or Houston. They are rust buckets.
Floating environmental disasters waiting to happen.
Potentially, yes. A
Yeah.
huge risk. If one of these breaks apart, there is no big insurance company like Lloyd's of London to pay for the cleanup. But they keep them running, and they operate with completely obscured ownership structures.
How do they do that?
Shell companies, owned by shell companies, registered in the Marshall Islands, Panama, or Liberia. Jurisdictions where it's easy to be anonymous. You try to trace the actual owner, and you just hit a brick wall.
It's a labyrinth, a paper trail to nowhere.
But the crucial part of their operation, the thing that makes them ghosts, is the AIS.
The automatic identification system, the transponder that tells the world, here I am, this is my speed, this is my direction.
Right. Every commercial ship is supposed to have one.
Hmm.
It's for safety, to avoid collisions in busy shipping lanes. But these captains,
They just turn them off.
they turn them off. They go dark. They vanish from the digital map. 1 minute they're there, leaving port the next. Poof, gone.
So a ghost ship leaves Iran. It sails out into the ocean. Then what? It can't just show up in China without any paperwork.
No. Then they engage in what's called STS ship-to-ship transfers.
Okay, paint a picture of that for us.
Imagine this scene. You have an Iranian tanker, fully loaded, sailing dark. It meets up with another tanker, also part of this shadow network, in international waters. This happens a lot off the coast of Malaysia or the wider Gulf of Oman.
In the middle of the ocean, no ports, no cameras, no authorities.
Open water. They drop massive fenders, big rubber buffers between the hulls so the ships don't smash each other in the waves. They hook up high-pressure hoses, and they pump the crude from the dark ship to the clean ship.
And the clean ship has the right paperwork. It's not registered as Iranian.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The clean ship might turn its transponder on after the transfer, and suddenly, on the paperwork, that oil isn't Iranian anymore. It's labeled as Malaysian blend or Omani crude.
A fake origin story.
It might even mix and blend in a little bit of legitimate oil just to throw off the chemical sniffers if anyone checks the viscosity or sulfur content.
It's money laundering, but for black gold, it's oil laundering.
Precisely. That is the perfect term for it. By the time it docks in China, it has a clean bill of health. The customs officer looks at the paper, it says Malaysian blend, they stamp it, the oil flows into the teapot.
And the cash, usually yuan or euro, I assume, not dollars, flows back to Tehran through some equally shadowy banking channel.
Exactly. Through smaller Chinese banks or other mechanisms that are outside of U.S. reach.
The scale of this is just staggering. We're talking about keeping an entire nation afloat via smuggling. What kind of money does this generate?
The estimates for 2025 suggest this trade generated over $40 billion in revenue for Iran.
40 billion.
That is the lifeline. That is what pays the Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC. That's what funds the ballistic missile program we're so worried about. That's what pays the subsidies on bread and gas to keep the population from rioting in the streets. Without that $40 billion, the regime collapses. Full stop.
But there's a flip side to this, isn't there? You mentioned the discount. It keeps them alive, but at what cost?
It's a double-edged sword, for sure. Yes, they get $40 billion, but think about the value destruction. Because they are forced to sell at such a deep discount, that $12 or $15 off per barrel, they are leaving massive amounts of money on the table.
Money that a country like Saudi Arabia or the UAE would get for the same barrel of oil.
Exactly. They're selling their national treasure at a fire sale price just to survive. If they could sell that same 1.5 million barrels a day on the open market at full price, they'd be earning billions more.
So it's a survival economy, not a growth economy. They aren't building for the future.
Exactly. They're eating their own seed corn. They aren't building new infrastructure. They're not investing in their people. They're just keeping the heart beating. They are mortgaging their future to pay for today.
And China's role here is really interesting to me. Is Beijing doing this because they love the ideology of the Islamic Republic? Is this a dictators club meeting where they just support each other?
Not at all.
Not even
Close. It's not ideological. It's what the sources call strategic arbitrage.
Arbitrage, finding a price difference and exploiting it.
Precisely. China is incredibly pragmatic. They don't care about the Shia revolution. They care about math. They get cheap energy, which lowers the cost of manufacturing for their factories, which gives them an edge in global trade.
And there's a strategic benefit, too.
A huge one. As a bonus, it keeps Iran afloat as a thorn in the side of the United States.
So it keeps the U.S. tied down in the Middle East, distracts Washington from the Pacific, and fuels Chinese industry on the cheap.
It's a win-win for Beijing. But make no mistake, if the U.S. offered China a better deal, or if the cost of protecting this trade became too high, Beijing would drop Tehran in a heartbeat. It's strictly business. There's no loyalty there.
So that's the oil. That's the cash flow. But you can't eat oil. You can't put crude oil in a microchip. You need goods. You need imports. And this brings us to the second pillar of their survival, which I found fascinating because it contradicts everything we hear about regional politics.
The neighbors.
The Gulf connection.
Right. It's so counterintuitive.
Because the narrative we always hear is Sunni versus Shia, Saudi versus Iran, mortal enemies. We hear about proxy wars in Yemen and Syria.
All of which is true. The hostility is real.
But if you look at the trade data between Iran and the Gulf Cooperation Council, GCC,
it's booming. We're looking at trade numbers north of $30 billion.
commerce over ideology.
Always. Money talks louder than theology.
Yeah.
And the key player here, the lung of the Iranian economy, is the UAE, specifically Dubai.
The lung. I love that metaphor. Explain how that works. Why is Dubai so critical?
Think about how sanctions work. You can't ship a container of Samsung phones or Toyota spare parts directly from Japan to Bandar Abbas in Iran.
The system won't allow it.
The banks won't clear the transaction, the insurance companies won't cover the ship, the front door is locked and bolted.
The doors are closed.
So Iran inhales through the UAE. The goods come into Dubai's Jebel Ali port, one of the busiest and most efficient ports in the world. They land there legitimately. It's just cargo landing in Dubai from Korea or Germany.
Nothing suspicious about that.
Nothing at all. Then they are loaded onto smaller dhows or coastal freighters. Thousands of them crisscross the Gulf every day and re-exported across the water to Iran.
It's a revolving door, a giant free trade zone that Iran uses as its back door.
It is, and it works both ways. Iran exhales its non-oil exports, pistachios, saffron, carpets, petrochemicals, back through the UAE to the rest of the world.
Ah, so that's how it works.
If you buy Persian saffron in a boutique in Paris, there's a good chance it came via Dubai with a stamp that masks its origin. Dubai becomes the laundry for Iranian goods.
And the UAE allows this. I mean, they are a close U.S. partner. They host U.S. troops at Al Dhafra Air Base.
They tolerate it. For the UAE, it's business, first and foremost. Dubai is a city of merchants, but it's also security.
How is it security?
They believe that if they trade with Iran, if they're indispensable to Iran's economy, then Iran is less likely to launch missiles at them. Trade creates a buffer. It's an insurance policy. Don't bomb your warehouse.
That makes a kind of cold, pragmatic sense. And then you have Oman.
Oman is the bloodstream, or maybe the whisperer. Oman has always played this unique role in the Middle East as the Switzerland of the Gulf.
The neutral player.
Always. It's the quiet corridor. If you need to move bulk, goods, cement, minerals, things that aren't high-tech, you go through Oman. But more importantly, if you need to pass a message from Washington to Tehran without it being on the front page of the New York Times, you go through Oman.
It's the back channel.
Always has been, always will be. In 2026, those back channels are burning hot. When the CIA director needs to send a warning to the IRGC, or when Tehran wants to signal a red line to the White House, the courier is often Omani. They are the essential diplomats of the shadows.
And even Saudi Arabia and Qatar are in the mix, despite the rivalry.
Saudi is cautious. Remember, they reopened diplomatic doors in that big Chinese brokered detente in 2023. It hasn't been a love fest. There's still deep, deep suspicion, but the doors are open. The chain is on the door, but it's open a crack. They are talking. Qatar is just geology at work. It's not about choice. They share the South Pars North Dome gas field, the world's largest natural gas reservoir with Iran.
They're tapping into the same straw.
They are literally drilling into the same pocket of gas.
Yeah.
You can't sanction geology. They have to talk. They have to cooperate on technical levels just to keep the gas flowing for both countries. If they don't coordinate pressure, they ruin the field for both of them.
So the takeaway on the economy is, the sanctions are hitting the official books hard. The formal economy is a disaster.
Absolutely catastrophic for the average person.
But the shadow economy, the Chinese teapots, the Dubai re-exports, the Omani corridors, that's what keeps the patient alive.
Exactly. It's a survival mechanism. But we have to be clear, survival isn't thriving. The Iranian people are suffering. Inflation is rampant. The currency is worthless.
Yeah.
And that economic desperation feeds directly into how they approach their military strategy.
How so?
Because if you are broke, you can't fight a rich man's war. You have to get creative.
Which brings us to part 2, the military doctrine. This connects perfectly. If you can't afford a $1 trillion Air Force like the Americans, if you can't buy F-35s at $100 million a pop, how do you fight?
You fight with needles and nets. You fight asymmetrically.
Mosaic defense, that's the term the sources used. It sounds artistic, but it's deadly.
It is. The core philosophy here is death by 1,000 cuts. Iran knows it cannot win a conventional war. If they lined up their tanks against U.S. Abrams tanks in the open desert, it would be over in hours.
It would be a massacre.
A total repeat of the Gulf War in '91, the highway of death. They studied that. They saw what American air power does to a conventional army. So they don't do that. They design a way of fighting that makes war too costly, too chaotic, and too politically toxic for the enemy to pursue.
So the goal isn't to win, it's to make the other side quit.
Exactly. Make it not worth the pain.
Let's look at the toolkit. The first tool is one we hear about constantly, the axis of resistance.
This is their primary deterrent. Their first line of defense and offense. Think of the Axis Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, the militias in Iraq and Syria, not just as political allies, but as a distributed strike system.
That sounds like a tech term. Distributed strike system. Like cloud computing, but for missiles.
It functions like one. It allows Iran to project power thousands of miles from its borders without leaving direct fingerprints. If a missile hits a ship in the Red Sea fired by the Houthis...
Is that an Iranian attack?
Strategically, yes. We know who supplied the tech, the training, the intelligence, but legally.
It's gray.
And that gray zone is where Iran lives. It gives them deniability, allows them to say, we didn't push the button, the Houthis did, they're autonomous actors. It muddies the water.
And it spreads the battlefield. If the U.S. or Israel wants to hit Tehran, suddenly they have to worry about rockets raining down from Lebanon, drones coming from Yemen, and militias attacking bases in Iraq.
You aren't fighting one country. You're fighting a hydra. You cut off one head, 2 more pop up.
It forces the enemy to disperse their forces. You can't just focus on Iran. You have to look everywhere at once. It paralyzes decision-making.
Absolutely. Who do you retaliate against? It's a nightmare for military planners.
Then you move to the naval strategy in the Gulf itself. The swarm.
This is fascinating, and it scares naval commanders more than they like to admit. The U.S. Navy builds floating cities.
Right.
Aircraft carriers that cost $13 billion. Destroyers that cost $2 billion. They are massive, high-tech, and incredibly potent.
But they are big targets.
Huge targets. Iran takes the exact opposite approach. The IRGC Navy uses small, fast attack craft, speedboats basically, fiberglass hulls.
How much do those cost?
Maybe $50,000 to build. They arm them with machine guns, unguided rockets, maybe a torpedo, and they don't send one.
They send 100.
They swarm. They act like a cloud of hornets attacking a bear. The bear is stronger, sure.
Yeah.
But if you have 50 fast boats coming at you from every angle, weaving in and out of the waves, it is incredibly difficult for a ship's radar and targeting systems to track and kill all of them before one gets through.
It's the ultimate cost asymmetry. A $50,000 boat threatening a multi-billion-dollar warship.
And you can't shoot them all with million-dollar standard missiles. You run out of ammo before they run out of boats. That's the logic. It flips the script on naval superiority.
And speaking of cost asymmetry, we have to talk about drones and missiles. This seems to be where the biggest shift has happened in the last few years.
The shift from dumb rockets to precision guidance has been the absolute game changer. 5-10 years ago, the threat was volume. They would fire a lot of unguided rockets and hope they hit something.
Like a shotgun blast?
Exactly. Now, they have precision. They have GPS and other guidance systems. They can hit specific targets.
The sources mentioned the Aramco attack from 2019 as the proof of concept for this.
That was the wake-up call for the world. They hit the Abqaiq oil processing facility in Saudi Arabia. And you have to understand, they didn't just hit the facility. They hit specific critical stabilization columns within the facility. They threaded the needle from hundreds of miles away.
And they did it with drones that cost, what, a few $1,000s?
A fraction of a Patriot missile interceptor, which costs millions. This is the saturation tactic.
Explain that.
You fire 20 cheap drones. The defender has to fire 20 expensive interceptors. If the defender system has a 95% success rate, one drone gets through.
And one is all it takes?
One drone hits the oil facility and you've won. If the attacker loses 19 drones, it costs them almost nothing. Eventually, the defender runs out of money or missiles. You overwhelm them with cheap quantity.
And holding it all together, the thing that makes all these threats so potent is the ultimate geographic weapon, the Strait of Hormuz.
The jugular vein of the world economy.
The numbers are mind-boggling.
20 million barrels of oil a day pass through that narrow strip of water. That's 1/5 of the world's total supply. Everything from Japan to Europe depends on it.
And the scary part is, they don't need to block it with a chain or sink a ship to stop the flow, do they?
No, not at all.
Hmm.
That's a common misconception. They just need to make it dangerous. If they lay mines in the water, or just threaten to target tankers with their swarm boats and drones, the insurance markets panic.
Ah, the insurance.
Lloyd's of London raises the war risk insurance premium so high that it becomes unprofitable to send a ship through. Shipping companies say, it's not worth the risk. The flow of oil stops just as effectively as if they built a concrete wall. It's economic hostage-taking.
So they have this asymmetric toolkit designed to make any conflict a nightmare. But we aren't talking in the abstract anymore, because in June 2025, things got very real.
Very real.
We need to talk about Operation Midnight Hammer.
This is the flashpoint. You cannot understand the tension in February 2026 without understanding what happened 8 months ago.
Take us back, June 22, 2025. What was the trigger?
Tensions had been boiling over for months. The intelligence community, U.S., Israeli, European, had come to a consensus that Iran was moving toward weapons-grade material. They were enriching uranium to 60%, which is just a technical step away from bomb fuel.
And they weren't cooperating with international inspectors.
They were stonewalling. They were, as one source put it, refusing to make sense. The diplomatic track was seen as a dead end. The intelligence suggested they were on the verge of a breakout.
And so the decision was made to stop them kinetically.
A U.S.-led strike. It was described as targeted, precise, Operation Midnight Hammer. They hit the main nuclear facilities, Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan.
These are the crown jewels of the nuclear program. Natanz is the main enrichment site. Fordo is the one buried deep in a mountain.
They are. And the damage was described in the reports as enormous. They used bunker-busting munitions. Entrances were collapsed. Centrifuge hulls were destroyed.
So mission accomplished? They stopped the bomb.
Well, that's the crucial but. It was not total obliteration. And this is the key lesson.
Why not? I mean, we had the biggest bombs in the world. Why couldn't they just wipe it off the map?
Because you can bomb a centrifuge, but you cannot bomb knowledge. You can destroy a building, but you cannot destroy the engineering schematics stored in the minds of the scientists or in dispersed hard drives. You can't bomb physics.
So it bought time? It was a delay tactic.
It delayed the program by months, maybe a year at the outside. But the aftermath was predictable. Iran didn't just pack up and go home.
What did they do?
They dispersed. They hardened their facilities. They started digging even deeper into the mountains, places where even our best bunker busters struggled to reach. They learned from the attack.
So in a way, the strike validated their paranoia. It proved their point.
It proved to them that a first strike is not a theory, it's a reality. And it convinced the hardliners in Tehran that the only true security, the only thing that will stop another Midnight Hammer, is a deterrent that cannot be bombed.
A bomb of their own.
Exactly. So while the strike reset the clock physically, psychologically, it might have actually accelerated the desire for a weapon.
And that brings us to the present, February 2026. The clock has ticked forward again. The delays bought by Midnight Hammer are expiring. And now there is a proposal on the table, a potential off-ramp. And it's coming from an unexpected place.
Or maybe a very expected place, depending on how you look at it. Moscow.
This is the Russian bridge. And frankly, it's one of the most interesting diplomatic maneuvers we've seen in years.
A very clever piece of statecraft.
So unpack this deal for us. What is Moscow actually offering?
The offer, which our sources confirm is still valid as of this week, is this. Iran agrees to halt all domestic uranium enrichment above the 5% level needed for power plants. They stop spinning the centrifuges for high-grade material on Iranian soil.
Okay, so they stopped the most dangerous part.
And in exchange, they transfer their existing stockpile, especially that dangerous 60% enriched stuff that's so close to bomb grade to Russia for safekeeping.
Okay, so Iran gives up the gas. They give up the material that scares everyone. What do they get in return? What's the quid pro quo?
Russia guarantees the supply of reactor-grade fuel for the Bushehr nuclear power plant and any other civilian reactors they build. Russia becomes their permanent nuclear fuel supplier.
So Iran keeps its nuclear power plants running. They kept the lights on. They get to say they have a peaceful nuclear program, but they lose the capacity to make a bomb because they aren't controlling the fuel cycle.
Exactly. It's the civilian-only compromise. The logic Russia is selling is, you say you only want peaceful energy? Fine. Here is the fuel. But if that's all you want, you don't need to enrich it yourself. It calls their bluff.
Why is Russia the one pushing this? I mean, Russia and Iran are supposed to be allies, right? They signed that Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Treaty back in January 2025. Why would Putin want to strip Iran of its biggest leverage?
They are partners, yes.
Yeah.
But it's complex. It's a frenemy situation. You have to look at the history.
Oh, okay.
Russia built the Bushehr plant in the 90s, true. But they also canceled the sale of the S-300 air defense system to Iran in 2010 when the UN asked them to. They have a history of using Iran as a bargaining chip when it suits them.
So Russia isn't doing this out of the goodness of their heart. There's something in it for them.
Absolutely not. Russia does not want a nuclear-armed Iran on its southern border. That would completely destabilize the region. It would provoke Saudi Arabia to get a bomb, Turkey to get a bomb, maybe even Egypt.
A nuclear arms race right next door.
That's a nightmare for Moscow.
Yeah.
They want a stable, predictable situation. Also, and this is key, Russia wants to be the power broker.
They want to be the one pulling the strings.
If this deal works, Russia becomes the guarantor of Iranian energy and security. That gives them immense leverage over Tehran. They want a dependent Iran, not an independent nuclear power. They want Iran to need them.
And the sources talk about this approach as a staircase. I found this concept really helpful.
Yes, this is a critique of the old way of doing things. In the past, the West often tried for the grand bargain, the all-or-nothing deal.
What do you mean?
The position was, we want you to stop enriching and stop your ballistic missile program and stop funding the Houthis and improve your human rights record all at once.
Maximalism. Fix everything or we talk about nothing.
Right. And maximalism fails because it's too heavy. It's too much for the Iranian political system to digest at once. The hardliners can block any part of it.
So the staircase is different.
The staircase approach says, let's just fix the most urgent problem first, the nuclear fuel issue. That's step one. Move the uranium to Russia. Once that's done and the immediate bomb threat is off the table, then we can move to step two and talk about missiles. Then step three, we talk about Yemen.
Implementation first.
Exactly. Start moving the material before you finish the paperwork on everything else. Build trust through action, not just words in a treaty.
But the clock is ticking. Because if this bridge isn't taken, if the hardliners in Tehran reject it, or if the West thinks it's a Russian trap, we go back to the alternative. We go back to the heart attack scenario.
And we need to really pause here, because I think people hear war in the Middle East and their minds immediately go to gas prices going up 50 cents at the pump. They think about it like a bad storm that passes.
But our sources are saying this is fundamentally different.
It's fundamentally different. Let's compare it to the Ukraine war, which is still fresh in our minds. When Russia invaded Ukraine, it was a massive shock. Food prices rose. Remember the grain crisis? Supply chains wobbled.
He was bad.
It was very bad. It was like a severe fever for the global economy. It sweated, it shook, but it adapted. We found other sources for wheat. We rerouted shipping. The system ultimately survived.
Right, but a war with Iran involving the Strait of Hormuz.
That is a cardiac arrest.
Why? Why is it so much worse? What's the mechanism?
Because oil isn't just a commodity like wheat. It is the blood of the global economy. It is in everything.
It's not just the gas in your car.
Not even close. It's the diesel that powers the trucks that bring food to your grocery store. It's the jet fuel for aviation. It's the feedstock for plastics, for fertilizers that grow our food, for pharmaceuticals. It touches every single thing you buy.
So if you cut off that flow, if you take 20 million barrels a day offline, even for a short time.
Oil doesn't just creep up, it jumps. It goes to $80, maybe $150 a barrel overnight. The market would panic.
And what does that do to the average person, to the global economy?
You get immediate cascading inflation. Everything you buy, food, electronics, clothes, costs more to move and more to make. But here's the kicker. Central banks, the Fed, the ECB, they are exhausted.
What do you mean?
They've spent the last few years fighting post-COVID inflation. They have raised interest rates to the breaking point. If inflation spikes again from an oil shock, they are out of ammo.
So they can't raise rates any higher without crashing the housing market and triggering a massive recession.
Exactly. You get stagflation, rising prices, a crashing economy, and high unemployment. It's the 1970s all over again, but worse. It's the worst of all worlds.
And what about the region itself? I mean, surely Saudi Arabia and the UAE would make a fortune if oil hits $150. Isn't there an incentive for them to secretly want this to happen?
You'd think so, but no. That's the great irony. In this scenario, they are the Gulf losers.
How does that work? Their main export is skyrocketing in price.
Because in a shooting war, their infrastructure becomes the target. Remember that distributed strike system we talked about?
Hezbollah, the Houthis.
If war breaks out, Iranian missiles aren't just flying at U.S. ships. They're flying at Saudi desalination plants that provide their fresh water. They're flying at Dubai's ports and airports. They're flying at the financial centers.
So the capital flight would be massive.
Instantaneous. Investors hate war. If Dubai is under threat of missile attack, the money leaves. The tourists leave, the expats leave. The security costs of defending their territory would obliterate any profit they make from the oil price spike.
It's an economic suicide pact for the region.
That's the perfect phrase for it. Nobody wins that war.
That is a grim picture, economic suicide pact. So we have the stakes, we have the mechanism for war, we have a potential bridge with the Russian deal. But how do we actually walk across that bridge? This brings us to part 6, the way out.
The solution, according to the sources we've read, has to be radical in its simplicity. It has to be direct dialogue.
Leader to leader. Cut out the middlemen.
Yes. The bureaucracy is too slow. The lower-level diplomats are stuck in their talking points. They are reading from binders written 3 years ago. You need the decision-makers in the room. We're talking about Putin, Xi, and in the American context, probably someone like Trump.
And the sources make a specific point about Donald Trump here. Whether you like him or hate him, his style might be uniquely suited for this moment.
It's his transactional worldview. He's willing to sit down with adversaries. He doesn't mind breaking protocol. He sees things as a deal to be made.
And in a situation this dangerous, you need someone who can cut through the noise and say, okay, what is the deal? What do you need? What do I need? Let's make this work.
He's not bound by the traditional diplomatic playbook.
And Putin and Xi play a role because they can actually deliver Tehran. Is that the idea?
Exactly. Washington can't force Tehran to do anything. It has no leverage left. But Putin holds the nuclear key with this fuel deal. Xi holds the economic key. He buys the oil. If those three leaders align on just one thing, no war, no bomb, they can impose a solution that the lower levels never could.
But there's another stakeholder group that often gets forgotten in these high-level talks. We talk about presidents and supreme leaders, but we forget the Iranian people.
The most important variable and the most overlooked. Look at the internal pressure cooker in Iran right now. 60% inflation, currency collapse, youth unemployment through the roof. The regime is fragile at home. They're sitting on a powder keg of their own making.
And there's this massive resource outside the country, the diaspora.
Millions of Iranians abroad, highly educated, wealthy, successful. In the U.S., in Europe, in Canada. They are a reservoir of human capital, as one report put it.
So the argument is that a peace deal isn't just about stopping centrifuges.
It's about unlocking the economy so that investment can return, so that human capital can return. It's about restoring dignity.
And that creates an incentive for the regime itself.
Exactly. If the regime can be convinced that a deal leads to economic survival, that they can sell their oil legally, that they can access their frozen bank accounts, that creates an internal incentive for them to take the deal, just to relieve the pressure at home.
So we have to reframe the narrative. It's not about regime change.
No. Regime change is a terrifying phrase for Tehran. It means they will fight to the death. If you tell a cornered animal you're going to kill it, it will bite you. The goal must be behavior change.
Explain the difference. What does that look like in practice?
Behavior change means you stay in power. We aren't coming to topple you, but you have to stop the nuclear program and stop the regional aggression. In exchange, you get to sell your oil legally. You get to fix your economy. You get to be a normal country.
It's integration, not annihilation.
It's making them have too much to lose. Right now, Iran feels like it has nothing to lose, so it acts recklessly. If they are integrated into the global economy, if they are trading openly with the UAE and Saudi Arabia, war becomes expensive for them too. It changes their calculus.
Yeah, that brings us back to the Gulf diplomacy we touched on earlier. The UAE and Saudi Arabia engaging on climate, on maritime security, those small steps.
It's the small stuff that builds the trust for the big stuff.
Yeah.
You talk about climate change. You talk about water scarcity. You build those connections. It humanizes the other side. It creates a hotline so that when a crisis happens, someone picks up the phone instead of launching a missile.
So we've covered a massive amount of ground today. Let's try to bring it all together. As we sit here in February 2026, we are essentially looking at two paths.
Path A and Path B.
Oh.
A fork in the road.
Path A is the status quo, which is really an escalator going down. Continued escalation. Operation Midnight Hammer Part 2 may be bigger, may be targeting leadership. The silent war becomes a loud war. The Strait of Hormuz gets mined.
Oil hits $150. The global economy has that heart attack. That is the path of least resistance right now. It's where momentum is taking us. It's gravity.
And Path B?
Path B is the narrow bridge. It's difficult to cross. It's the Russian nuclear fuel deal. It's the staircase approach. It's Trump, Putin, and Xi getting in a room, virtual or real, and cutting the Gordian knot.
It's messy.
It's messy. It's imperfect. It leaves a lot of people unsatisfied because it's not a total victory for anyone.
But it avoids the heart attack.
It keeps the patient alive.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, survival is the definition of victory.
It's fascinating. In an age of invisible cyber wars, drone swarms, and shadow fleets, the most radical, disruptive thing you can possibly do is sit down and talk.
It usually is. The simplest solution is often the hardest to execute.
So for our listeners, as you watch the news in the coming weeks, don't just look at the headlines about threats and strikes. Look at the numbers. Watch the teapot refinery data coming out of Shandong province in China.
Mm-hmm.
Watch the oil tanker movements in the Gulf of Oman.
Look for the AIS signals going dark. That's where the real story is happening. That's the pulse of this crisis.
And keep an eye on Moscow. That proposal is the canary in the coal mine. If Iran takes it, we breathe a sigh of relief. If they reject it outright, buckle up.
Indeed.
That's it for this deep dive. We'll be tracking this closely. Stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you next time.